Subscribe because it is free.
The emergency klaxon screamed across the galactic council chambers like dying space whales, their piercing wail causing the Zephyrian delegates to instinctively curl into their protective shells, while the gastropod representatives secreted stress mucus all over their hover platforms. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, these alarms had only sounded 12 times. Today marked the 13th, and every being in that massive crystalline amphitheater knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. General HFY materialized through the quantum teleporter with a kind of dramatic flair that had made her legendary across 47 star systems. Standing 12 feet tall with a crystalline exoskeleton that refracted light into menacing rainbows, her four arms moved with predatory precision as she surveyed the assembled representatives. This was the World Breaker, the tactical genius who had conquered entire sectors before most species had invented the wheel. Her mere presence had once caused 3 separate civilizations to surrender without a single shot being fired. But today, something was different. The general's normally perfect posture had a slight slump to it. Her primary eyes, which usually glowed with confident malice, seemed dimmer. Most disturbing of all, her translator unit kept emitting strange clicking sounds, as if struggling to process unfamiliar vocabulary. Chancellor Blorp, a gelatinous mass of anxiety even on good days, began vibrating at frequencies that made nearby furniture hum. General Zwaxtala, his voice bubbled through the chamber's universal translator. Please tell us this emergency session isn't about the Earth situation. Please tell us you found a way to break their defenses, to crush their pathetic resistance, to finally claim that backwater planet for the hegemony. The silence that followed was so complete that the insectoid delegation's nervous chittering sounded like thunder. High Arbitrator, her serpentine form coiled elegantly around her speaking platform, fixed the general with her hypnotic gaze. General, your silence is more concerning than any words could be. What has happened on Earth? Zwaxtala's translator crackled again, this time accompanied by what sounded suspiciously like profanity in several dead languages. She cleared her throat with a sound like grinding crystals. Esteemed council members, respected colleagues, beings of wisdom and power. She paused, and for the first time in her military career, her voice carried uncertainty. We cannot defeat the humans. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. 3 delegates fainted outright, their biological functions shutting down from pure shock. The avian representatives began molting stress feathers that drifted to the chamber like confused snow. Someone from the aquatic sector accidentally activated their emergency beacon, flooding their section with brine while they gasped in panic. The mechanical collective's representative actually blue-screened, their optical sensors cycling through error messages in 17 different programming languages. Chancellor Blorp's gelatinous form began oscillating between colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. That's impossible. Humans are barely past their primitive combustion engine phase. They haven't even achieved proper fusion technology. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. They still use paper money. Yes, General Zwaxtal replied, her voice carrying the weight of 3 years of impossible defeats. They do use paper money. They also turn our plasma cannons into what they call sick light shows and somehow figure out how to reverse engineer our quantum processors using something called YouTube tutorials and what appears to be caffeine-induced determination. The translator unit sparked again, and this time everyone clearly heard it emit a distinctly human phrase involving reproductive impossibility and maternal insults. The general quickly adjusted the device, her crystalline features somehow managing to convey embarrassment. High Arbitrator Cassista's tail twitched with barely contained incredulity. General, you commanded the forces that brought the Titan worlds to their knees in 6 standard cycles. You orchestrated the surrender of the Hive Mind Collective without losing a single ship. How can one primitive planet possibly? Because the general interrupted, her 4 arms spreading in a gesture of complete bewilderment. Nothing in our tactical databases, nothing in our psychological warfare manuals, nothing in 3 millennia of conquest experience prepared us for beings who respond to overwhelming force by asking if we're going to cry about it, and then proceeding to steal our technology, while calling us names their translators refuse to process. The chamber fell silent again, save for the sound of the gastropod delegation's continued stress secretions hitting the floor with wet plops that somehow perfectly punctuated the general's admission of the impossible. General Zwiextala activated her tactical hologram display, the three-dimensional battlefield map flickering to life above the assembly. What appeared to have been a textbook example of overwhelming force meeting primitive resistance. Instead, the display showed something that violated every principle of military science the galaxy had developed over 3,000 years. Our initial assault followed standard protocol, the general began, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who had watched perfection crumble into chaos. Orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by atmospheric dominance, then ground deployment of superior forces. Every species in galactic history surrenders at this point. They see our ships, they understand the futility of resistance, they negotiate terms. The hologram zoomed in on Earth's surface, showing scattered impact sites where alien weapons had struck. But instead of the expected devastation and surrender broadcasts, the display revealed something far more disturbing. Humans were crawling over the wreckage like insects, but they weren't fleeing or mourning. They were dismantling everything with an enthusiasm that bordered on religious fervor. Within 48 standard hours, human engineers had reverse-engineered our plasma rifles. Not simplified versions, not crude approximations. Perfect functional replicas built from what they called scrap metal and spite. They were manufacturing our own weapons faster than we could deploy them. The general's crystalline features somehow managed to convey the expression of someone watching reality fold on itself. Chancellor Blorp's gelatinous mass rippled with confusion. But surely their primitive manufacturing capabilities couldn't match our quantum forge technology? They use microwave ovens, Zwiextala replied flatly. Somehow, inexplicably, they turn kitchen appliances into weapons foundries. Our intelligence reports indicate they were using something called redneck engineering and holding together with duct tape and prayer. Our xenobiologists still can't explain how prayers affect quantum mechanics. The display shifted to show combat footage that made several delegates reach for their emergency medications. Human soldiers were fighting with equipment that shouldn't exist, wielding alien technology like they'd been born to it, while simultaneously using tactics that no military academy in the galaxy taught because they were considered too stupid to work. They weaponized everything, the general continued, her voice growing more strained with each word. Farm equipment became siege engines. Musical instruments became psychological warfare devices. We documented 17 separate incidents of humans using what they call dubstep to disrupt our neural interfaces. 3 of our commanders are still receiving therapy. High Arbitrator kisses the serpentine form coiled tighter around her platform. Surely their lack of proper supply lines would cripple their war effort. The general's translator unit emitted what sounded suspiciously like bitter laughter. Supply lines are apparently optional for humans. They fought for 6 months on expired rations they complained about constantly while simultaneously using them as improvised explosives. Meanwhile, our forces required specialized atmospheric processors, temperature-controlled environments, and daily nutritional supplements tailored to each species' biology. The hologram displayed what the military databases had classified as tactical impossibility events. Human civilians who should have been cowering in shelters were instead forming what they called neighborhood watch groups, armed with alien weapons and homemade armor that shouldn't have stopped a harsh word, let alone plasma fire. The phenomenon they call Florida Man single-handedly destroyed our psychological warfare division, Zwiextala admitted, her 4 arms moving in a gesture that roughly translated to existential bewilderment. Our predictive algorithms couldn't process reported humans fighting our war mechs with what appeared to be pool noodles and aggressive enthusiasm. When the mechs were defeated, investigation revealed the pool noodles were somehow electrified and the humans were riding genetically modified alligators. The insectoid delegation began their nervous chittering again, a sound like breaking glass that filled the chamber. The general raised her primary hand for silence. But the worst part, the thing that broke our tactical computers and sent our strategists into recursive logic loops, was their complete inability to understand when they were losing. Every setback became motivation. Every defeat became a learning experience. Every casualty became a rallying cry. They turned our psychological warfare broadcasts into what they called memes and used them for recruitment propaganda. The display showed intercepted human communications that made no sense to galactic intelligence. Images with text that seemed designed to mock the very concept of surrender, videos of humans dancing while their cities burned, and recruitment posters featuring alien weapons with captions like, "Come and take it," and "Make my day, Space Boy." 3 years, General Zhuaixtala concluded, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years of this madness, and they're not just surviving, they're thriving, they're learning, and worst of all, they're laughing while they do it. The holographic displays shifted to show what remained of the hegemony's psychological warfare division, a collection of beings who looked like they'd spent the last 3 years staring into an abyss that had started staring back, and then invited them over for dinner. Their lead psychologist, a mind weaver whose species had perfected mental manipulation over millennia, was now rocking back and forth while muttering human phrases that made no linguistic sense. Phase 2 of our standard conquest protocol involves breaking the enemy's will to fight, General Zhuaixtala explained, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had watched science become superstition. We demonstrate our technological superiority through controlled displays of power. We broadcast our demands directly into their communication networks. We show mercy once, then escalate until they understand the futility of resistance. The display showed recordings of the hegemony's intimidation broadcasts, perfectly crafted psychological warfare designed to crush morale and inspire surrender. These same techniques had reduced warrior cultures to weeping pacifists and turned militant empires into cooperative colonies within days. The human response, the general continued, her translator unit crackling with what sounded like suppressed hysteria, was to rate our intimidation videos on something called YouTube and leave comments asking if we were even trying and suggesting we get good scrubs. Our terror-inducing battle footage became what they termed reaction content for their entertainment platforms. Chancellor Blorp's gelatinous form had stopped its nervous oscillating and was now perfectly still, the biological equivalent of a system crash. They mocked your psychological warfare. Worse, they turned it into recruitment material. Our most terrifying demonstration of orbital bombardment capability became a human military advertisement with the caption, "Join the Space Force. We've got aliens to fight." Our surrender demands were auto-tuned into what they called sick beats and played at their victory celebrations. The display showed intercepted human communications that defied every principle of psychological manipulation. Where there should have been fear, there was excitement. Where there should have been despair, there was determination. Where there should have been surrender, there were humans actively seeking out alien forces to fight them with increasingly creative methods. But the true horror began when we discovered their pack bonding instincts, Zhuaixtala said, her forearms trembling as she accessed files that bore warning labels in 17 different languages. Humans will die for complete strangers, not just their own species, but any being they perceive as needing protection. Our wounded soldiers started reporting that humans were providing medical aid to enemy combatants. Hi, arbitrator Kissa's hypnotic eyes dilated with confusion. They were healing your forces? Adopting them. Our psychiatric division documented over 3,000 cases of human families taking in alien soldiers as battle buddies, teaching them human customs, feeding them human food, and somehow convincing them that the invasion was totally not cool, man. We lost an entire battalion not to combat casualties, but to humans who kept asking if our troops were eating enough and needed someone to talk to. The chamber erupted in the galactic equivalent of nervous breakdowns. The crystalline delegate began refracting light in patterns that indicated severe distress, while the gaseous representatives started condensing into smaller, more anxious forms. Our defectors weren't being brainwashed or coerced. The general continued relentlessly. They were being welcomed. Humans have a saying, the more the merrier. They appear to genuinely believe that anyone could become human through sufficient exposure to what they called good vibes and mom's cooking. Our exopsychologists couldn't classify this behavior because it violated every principle of survival instinct we documented. The display showed footage that would have been heartwarming if it weren't so tactically catastrophic. Alien soldiers teaching human children about quantum mechanics, while the children taught them how to play something called tag. Former hegemony warriors wearing human clothing and participating in what appear to be recreational activities involving the ritualistic consumption of fermented beverages. The final straw came when humans began reverse engineering our propaganda techniques, Zwickstall admitted. Her crystalline features somehow convey an expression of someone who had watched their life's work turn inside out. They created counter-propaganda so effective that our own forces started questioning the invasion. Humans convinced 3 separate battle groups that conquering Earth would be super awkward and kind of a dick move, and suggested that we should maybe try talking first next time. The general paused, her translator unit emitting sounds that definitely weren't in any official language database. They offered to teach our soldiers how to be better people and invited our commanders to something called anger management classes because, and I quote, "Invasion is just hurt feelings with extra steps, and we're here for you, space buddy." The chamber had descended into the kind of silence that preceded either enlightenment or complete civilizational collapse. General Zwickstall stood before the assembled representatives of 47 star systems, her crystalline form reflecting the holographic data that would reshape galactic understanding of warfare, evolution, and the fundamental nature of persistence itself. After 3 years of defeat, our xenobiology division finally uncovered the truth, she began, her voice carrying away a revelation that had broken the minds of researchers across 12 different scientific disciplines. Humans are persistence predators. Not evolved from, are currently, right now. They have never stopped being apex hunters who simply refuse to quit. The holographic display shifted to show evolutionary data that made the insectoid delegation's chittering rise to a panic crescendo. Earth's ecosystems revealed a planet where humans had systematically outcompeted every other apex predator, not through superior strength or speed, but through the simple, terrifying ability to never give up. They don't sleep properly, Zwickstall continued, her forearms moving in patterns that suggested existential dread. They function on 4 hours of rest, synthetic stimulants, and what appears to be pure spite. Our forces require 8-hour regeneration cycles in controlled environments. Humans consider sleep a suggestion and have documented cases of their soldiers fighting effectively for 72 hours straight while consuming nothing but caffeine and what they call energy drinks that would qualify as chemical weapons in 14 star systems. Chancellor Blorp had achieved a new color that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum, a shade that somehow conveyed the concept of mistakes were made in fluorescent terror. But surely their primitive nutrition would limit their endurance. They eat anything, the general replied flatly. Our intelligence reports document humans consuming expired military rations while complaining about the taste, then using those same rations as improvised explosives. They've been observed eating substances that would kill most carbon-based life forms and describing the experience as builds character and puts hair on your chest, which appears to be a desirable outcome despite the apparent biological impossibility. The display showed combat footage that violated every principle of tactical warfare. Human soldiers who should have been retreating instead advanced with a kind of grim determination usually reserved for religious zealots, except their religion appeared to be proving people wrong out of sheer bloody-mindedness. The breaking point came when we realized they fight harder when you tell them they can't win, Zwickstall admitted, her translator crackling with what sounded like the linguistic equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Standard military doctrine assumes rational actors who weigh costs against benefits. Humans operate on what our psychologists have classified as weaponized spite. The more impossible the odds, the more determined they become. Tell a human something cannot be done, and they will do it specifically to annoy you. High Arbitrator Kisses' serpentine form had coiled so tightly around her platform that the metal was beginning to warp. This explains their tactical unpredictability, but surely superior numbers and technology would eventually... They're teaching our own forces to fight like them, the general interrupted, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who had watched certainty dissolve into chaos. Not converting them, not brainwashing them, teaching them. Our defectors aren't just joining human forces. They're becoming more effective soldiers. They're learning to function on spite, to adapt equipment beyond its design parameters, to treat impossible odds as personal challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. The chamber erupted in the galactic equivalent of collective nervous breakdown. The crystalline delegate began refracting light in patterns that indicated severe optical distress, while several gaseous representatives actually began precipitate anxiety onto the chamber floor. The Hegemony Council has reached a unanimous decision, Zwiextal announced, accessing files that bore seals from the highest levels of galactic government. Earth is to be redesignated from conquest target to diplomatic priority. We are withdrawing all forces and establishing what official documentation terms a strategic waiting period, but what our field commanders are calling running away before they decide to visit us. The general's holographic display shifted one final time, showing humans already reverse engineering captured FTL drives with the same enthusiasm they'd shown for everything else. The footage revealed human engineers working with tools that shouldn't exist, powered by determination that defied physics, cheerfully announcing their intention to take this show on the road and see what else is out there. The official position is that humans are not worth conquering. General Zwiextal concluded, her crystalline features somehow managing to convey the expression of someone who had stared into the abyss and discovered it was filled with coffee-drinking bipeds, asking if anyone wanted to be friends. The unofficial position is that we're updating our do not engage protocols and hoping they're too busy being friendly to notice we exist until they develop proper space travel and can join the galactic community as equals rather than conquered subjects. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of the gastropod delegation stress secretions and what might have been the distant sound of human laughter echoing across 3 light years of space.